This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is President of Palamina Corp, Mr. Andrew Thomson. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me this morning. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thanks.
Andrew,
Thanks,
you're very welcome. I was speaking with a director of the company, Hugh Agro, of course, of Revival Gold, who just recently published a very robust resource for the company the other day. And we joked about how enthusiastic I get for real stories. And I told him with Revival that enthusiasm was validated with that 2 million ounce resource across all categories. I'm very excited about Palamina. And I would love for you to explain to the people a little bit about what you're doing, because you literally have been tying up district scale land packages in a part of Peru, southeastern Peru, that has seen very little exploration modern day. And frankly, there's a modern day gold rush going on down there. So I'd love for you to put some context to that.
Well, there's a belt in southeastern Peru known as the Puno Gold Belt. There's really two orogenic belts that are east of the Andes. One is Pataz, where there's in excess of 40 million ounces has been proven up. We're looking at a belt that's 75 kilometers by 175 kilometers long. In January of 2018, a lot of the ground came open. It had been open for some time. We staked up a great deal of it. We're up to just under 80,000 hectares. We've got 5 district plays. And we've been carrying out systematic exploration in areas that have been ground truthed by informal miners. So the area really hasn't seen a lot of modern day exploration, if any. What Palamina has done is we acquired a team that had proven up a fairly large, million ounce plus deposit known as Oyachea, who have 35 years cumulative experience in the belt. And as the ground's been coming open, we've been staking it. So we really have had very little competition, which is somewhat surprising. But what's really intriguing about this area for me is that there's a deposit known as La Rinconada. It's actually Sleeping Beauty is the name of the mountain range, but it's at the same elevation as Everest, and there's 35,000 informals mining there, which is quite astounding. But it's what I call a glacial deposit, and again, we feel there's been a fair amount of material come out of there. And then there's 700 square miles of alluvial deposits sitting at Madre de Dios at the bottom of our range, where they're up to 30 meter deep in some of the pits. So there's a lot of gold coming out of these areas on an informal basis. And there's also Untuca, which is a horizonte play that's producing in the area. But these are all either private and or informal. There aren't any major companies in this area producing. So it's a bit of a it was hard to get to. At one point, it was Shining Path. So it's an area that sort of has its different permutations, but we feel very strongly that it's a kilometer 88 or a significant orogenic gold belt, and all the work we've done to date is proving that up.
Now, you mentioned that this area is very hard to get to. Traditionally, there hasn't been a lot of infrastructure, which was a benefit to you because you were able to stake, again, 5 districts. Can you talk a bit about how that's developing now?
Well, as an example, our Gaban property is on the newly built intercontinental highway that connects the coast of Peru with the coast of Brazil. It's 4.5 hours from Puerto Maldonado, which is a fairly significant airport. It sits right above these alluvial deposits, but there's 3 hydroelectric dams. There's 5 proposed, but 2 have been built. The third one's being built. So there's actually there's infrastructure at that property that the majors would be envious of. So this sort of, along with this, you're seeing these informal miners are getting pretty sophisticated, and they're putting in their own roads, and there's a lot of electricity going through these areas as a result of the hydroelectric dams. So from our perspective, it's really got very low geologic risk, and as it opens up, it's becoming quite intriguing. And the one thing that sort of we can take away from the team that's been exploring in this belt is the gold often occurs with pyrrhotite. And so we are planning a 3,000 plus kilometer airborne, it's underway at the moment, where we're going to fly it. We should be able to pick out areas in terms of it's all structurally controlled, and within the slate and the quartz, the gold occurs with pyrrhotite. So we should be able to see it, which is pretty exciting. So in these areas such as Gaban, where it's really difficult exploration from the point of view that it's jungle, it's locating the shear zones that's really key. And at Gaban, there's 11 sets of alluvial miners in the streams mining coarse gold. So, we're pretty close to the source, we believe. But really, the aha moment's going to, we're pretty sure we'll be able to see the structures. We just hope there aren't a lot of what I would call benign structures with metallic signatures where it will cloud our vision, if you want. But, at least we'll be able to pick out the areas. So when we're doing ground reconnaissance, it's a little different than some of the stream set programs that are going on with other companies where they're just looking for sniffs of gold. So for us, we think we can advance that particular property very quickly. So that just gives you an indication of what we're doing. And then, more recently, we staked another 20,000 hectares to tie up key areas, that we think, based on satellite imagery, have structural features that we want to hold.
And just to be clear again, how the total land package, looking at all the projects, the 5 projects thus far, what does that look like again?
It's about 77,000 hectares, or just under 80,000 hectares that have been staked and applied for, titled, and acquired.
Wow. That's impressive. Now, you also touched on the fact that the majors have shown interest, and we're not talking about the majors have shown interest by talking about moving into the area. I understand that Fresnillo has been in then basically neighboring area to some of your projects. Is that accurate, Andrew?
Well, Peñoles and Fresnillo are very active in the area, and Peñoles has actually defined a significant gold deposit. No one is really sure because it's internal. We know we're sure it's above 1 million ounces. And it's one called Capac Orco, which is in one of the systems that we're dealing with. And then Fresnillo has been very aggressive throughout Peru, especially in this Puno belt, on acquiring ground. And they're paying fairly big dollars in terms of going to remate or auction on a per hectare basis. So, and it's not that Newmont and Barrick and the groups that have been active on the gold side in Peru are unaware of this area. There just hasn't been a discovery of size to push them to the next level to actually start developing something. And it really speaks to the fact that, Peru is, for the most part, not been systematically explored. They tend to go to production very quickly. And, again, for us, the shadow head frame exploration that we're looking at here really has to do with finding where the informal miners are producing and going into those areas.
Let's talk about the team, Andrew, because the team's going to be critical. I mean, you're looking for 1 million ounce plus deposits in each one of these districts. That's the goal, correct?
The goal is to find something of substance, yes.
Perfect.
We think that these systems run for kilometers for the most part. And again, we're just trying to identify the zones. The focus of the current airborne geophysical program is to identify the zones where we can see, structures worthy of that sort of target.
Who do you have helping lead those efforts in country? Because we know that when you're operating in a country that's not your home country, you definitely want boots on the ground and people familiar with the local politics, with the community, and with the culture. Who do you have leading those efforts? So,
we're sort of formally known, in our last company, we were known for putting money in the ground. And in this case, our team is all in-country Peruvian. So we limit our expenditure where we're not flying people in. We don't have a lot of... there isn't a big education because, again, they have 35 years experience in the belt and have found a 1 million ounce plus deposit. So there's a company called Minera IRL that had a fairly sophisticated geologic team at Oyachea, which is the gold deposit they defined within the belt. They completed 81 plus kilometers of drilling. So they have a very good understanding of the geology and the signatures. And what I call they went through the aha moment in terms of trying to figure out. Often with these deposits, there's a moment where you really figure out the pathfinders and how the systems work. They've gone through that. So Palamina first acquired that team and then went on to acquire a lot of the ground that it now currently holds. So it's led by Don MacGyver, who's an expat from South Africa who's lived in Peru for, I'm not exactly sure how much time. He's spent at least 18 years looking at this belt. And then there's Yuri Valdivieso, and we have, beyond that, there's 3 other geologists, 2 geotechs, a GIS guy, and a few supplemental people on the ground, full-time, operating out of Lima primarily. And again, unlike countries like Ecuador that's kind of stealing some of Peru's thunder in terms of it being one of the big exploration districts, we're not flying a group of people in. There's lots of drills in country, and more importantly, if you look at southern copper's decision to put in billions in investment in Peru, there's a lot of established producers. So from our perspective, we think Peru's a very underrated jurisdiction for the moment. I think it's one of the best countries in the world for finding gold deposits, which is what we're after, and we feel we're onto that. So, that gives you some idea. So in terms of the team, again, we're not putting people up at hotels. Everybody's established. They're around their families. So it really is a good environment for continuing what really is a look at this belt that started, 20 years ago.
Now, you're pretty well known in the junior resource space, but for those that are new to the story and may not be familiar with you, can we talk a bit about your background, Andrew, and your success in the past?
Yeah, so I'm entrepreneurial. I take a pretty vanilla black and white approach to it. I don't fall in love with assets. In the last round, I ran a company that was chasing district scale plays in Jalisco. We had quite a few joint venture partners from Sumitomo to Gold Reserve, Timmins Gold, and looking at some of our projects. We didn't bill ourselves as a project generator, but we had a lot of money spent on our project by other groups. But I think the one that we chose to take forward ourselves was one called El Barqueño, or it was in the El Barqueño district, called El Rayo, but it was a silver play. We eventually sold that company to Agnico Eagle, and we spun out Palamina. So, we've had success. We've found what I would call, fairly significant deposit, and we're now trying to repeat that on the gold basis in Peru.
Perfect. Moving forward, you've mentioned the geophysical surveys, the airborne. When do we anticipate being able to learn about how that went and the results and what you're seeing?
So we're expecting, again, today we've got the fuel set up. We've got the areas picked for the helicopter where they're going to be based. Depending on, we're flying at elevation in terms of our Coasa play. And then we're flying at, a lower elevation at the bottom of the mountain range on the east side. So depending on the weather, at elevation, we're still seeing a bit of a mist. But the best time to fly is in July. So it will be well underway then. It's not going to take very long. It's only about a 4-week program. We may extend it. There's another area that we've seen some good results where we may extend it. But I'm hoping to have all the data back by the beginning of August. And just to be clear, NewSense, the group that are carrying out, have a online platform where, as they're gathering the data, we're able to see it and make decisions in-house. So, it's kind of an intriguing, it's the geochemical companies allow you to go in and look at the assays as they come out. And, if you're like me and you like to see it happening, we're getting pretty excited because we're getting to the point now at Coasa is likely going to be the first property we drill. We've just applied for permits in environmental, or we're undergoing environmental, applying for drill permits. But with the new laws, we think we'll get there by year's end. And we're just trying to make a decision on what target areas we're going to drill on that property.
Andrew, you have a tiny market cap of just over 11 million Canadian, and we know it's a tough market in the junior resource space, which is the best time to go out there and put together these colossal land packages. Frankly, are you still, without going into too much detail, are you still looking?
Looking at more ground? Well,
yes.
What we're trying to do, we do have other properties. We did a study on the batholith, sort of also in southern Peru, but on the western side where we staked some ground. There's one area near Ica that we like for potential IOCG. I'm a big believer that copper is going to go a little nuts with the new electrical age. At the end of the day, people forget if you have electricity, you need copper, and it should drive things. So we've tied up some ground there with a view to aggregation. So we do have other irons in the fire, but we're 98% focused for the moment on this belt because we really believe strongly that, again, the informals are mining to possibly 40 to 100 meters if that. In a lot of areas, it's only down about 30 meters when they start running into caving issues. And from our perspective, these orogenic systems, as you know, with the revival deal, these things can go down, kilometer, 2 kilometers. And, you've got some in the world now that are down 2.5 kilometers and they're still mining. So from our perspective, like a lot of areas in Peru that haven't been drilled, this one screams drill me. So that's really the focus here is going to be to drill, an existing property, which should shine the light on the other properties. But more importantly, the amount of visible gold and gold being mined currently, we estimate there's about 2 million ounces, but there's 28% of Peru's gold is produced by these informal workers who, in this belt, where they don't report a great deal of the gold that's sold to Bolivia. So when you start to think of it in the context of Peru being, the sixth largest producer of gold in the world, it really speaks to the fact that this belt is probably producing a lot, has the capability to hold a lot more than what it's showing. So when it gets down to it, Mother Nature is not very accommodating. And we think in this particular case, she's going to be very generous. And so it's just a matter of doing the work to be able to put together the formula. And again, we've got a team that has that experience. So it's not it's an overnight success story, possibly from the perspective that we've got a team of guys that really understand it. And all of our staking and everything that we're doing is based on, their understanding of the belt. So we're just really continuing with that. And I think it's the right moment in, Peru's history to be able to bring this belt forward.
Now, when you mention miners mining, and I describe it as a modern day gold rush, I would encourage everybody to go to the Palamina website, palamina.com, and just look at some of the pictures in the gallery, because it's not an exaggeration, and I think that'll lend some credence to why I'm so excited to see exploration results from these multiple districts that you managed to put together. I mentioned the tiny market cap. What does the share structure look like, Andrew?
Well, on a very macro basis, in terms of shares outstanding, there's just under 30 million, and on a fully diluted basis, it's 40 million. So it's a pretty straightforward share structure. Of note, we have Ernesto Chavarria, who was a big supporter of Soltoro, our last company, and he holds just under 10%. I hold over 10%, and if you look at my insider trading, I buy very regularly. So I'm still a believer in the sense that I'm buying in the market actively, but directors and management hold about 15%. So just those two groups are at about 25%, and we've got a lot of loyal shareholders. So, it's fairly tight, and a lot of people, I think in terms of, if you look at the fact that it's a fairly new company with a tight structure, we've got a lot of legs in the sense that it isn't, I would encourage people to read the president's letter, because what we're seeing a lot of in the marketplace is, to be honest, there's a lot of groups that have been active on projects for many years, but they have, what I would call legacy problems, where they've got either too many shares out of the project's been walked around a little too much, where even though it's a competing project, and the way I've put it in the newsletter, president's letter, is we're attracting attention because we've got new product that's very fresh. There's a lot of guys, it's like going in the hardware store and seeing something that's been repackaged and taped together. No matter how good that wrench might be, you're still going to buy the one in the new package. So from my perspective, not only are we more appealing from that perspective, even if these other projects are as good, but really I think this company is designed to fulfill the needs of the majors. And I would encourage people to look at the board of directors we've put together, the amount of money that's been raised, the deals that have done, and understand that these are, not so much the advisory board, but the board itself is made up of guys under the age of 55 that all have very proven track records. And, this is really speaks volumes for where we want to take this.
Full disclosure, I'm a shareholder. I eat my own cooking. Everybody knows that. So yes, you should absolutely consider me biased. I'm biased with my checkbook, but I'm a happy shareholder and a long-term one at that. I think this is a story that has legs for years and years. This isn't a 4-month, 5-month story that's going to go away anytime soon. And I absolutely believe that once you start getting some of these results in public, that the joint ventures are going to start happening. Andrew, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Can we talk about the cash position? How you plan on managing that?
Well, effectively, it's a fairly tightly held stock, and we have had interest from senior companies. It's a little early to do a royalty deal, but at the end of the day, one of the ways to keep the share structure tight is to get a big brother and or a goaltender involved, and we're sort of working towards that. The debate really is whether to go drilling before or after. We're not having issues raising money. We were oversubscribed. It speaks to the board and the team. But, again, I think this company, in terms of its trajectory, and is really designed to fulfill the needs of the majors that are running out of ore and need to replace it with things that are going to meet their tonnage demands. And that's really the company's been designed to tie up enough ground where they see the district scale potential. And it's sort of the old world Barrick model from the junior point of view, where you're trying to do shadow head frame exploration in districts that have huge potential. And again, I would implore people to look at Rinconada, where there's 35,000 informal mining at 5,300 meters. I mean, when I talk about being under a glacier, that's the base camp of Everest, and it's getting bigger every year. And then there's the 700 square kilometers, or equally 35,000 people who are doing alluvial mining at the base of the mountain range, where, again, it's expanding every year and encroaching on the parks. The government parks where they're trying to keep them out, and CNN's doing, last November did a full expose on the troubles with those areas in terms of the environmental problems it's causing. But really what it amounts to, all this gold is coming from somewhere, and it's this, we believe, a big portion of the source is this orogenic belt. So, candidly, we've been pretty quiet about what we're doing until we haven't been shouting from the rooftops because we're still in acquisition mode in terms of the ground. I'm comfortable now with the land position that we have to be able to start promoting it. And the webpage was only updated 2 months ago in terms of putting the pictures up and kind of trying to show people what we're doing. So we're at a stage now where we're starting to, bring it out of the box, where we've got the ground position that we want. And, I think this, if we look back, this moment, this will be an inflection point where we're flying this ground because it's never been flown. There's been no geophysics on the ground that we're working. And I think we're going to be able to see the structure based on the fact that the gold occurs with pyrrhotite. And it will really be a big revelation. And that's the sort of thing that, again, the majors are attracted to, because if they can see structures that run for kilometers and there's visible gold in these structures, then it starts to get pretty exciting.
Fascinating stuff. One last point that I think is important to make, Andrew, is the fact that the near surface or at surface gold is important, but people should understand that these systems tend to extend downwards for over 1,000 meters at depth. Is that accurate, Andrew?
Yeah, orogenic systems they're I always get it wrong. Telescoping, I can never pronounce it. But yeah, they tend to continue to depth, and again, they tend to be higher grade. And to be clear, at Gabon, we've got guys mining gold in the streams locally. On the Coria that we staked, there's 3-kilometer trend with 1,800 guys mining, coarse visible gold underground. Bendy, same thing. Up at Kawasa, where we're probably going to run our first drill program, Crucera's already defined, or gold mining now holds Crucera, but they've already defined 1 million ounces indicated, 1 million ounces inferred in the structure that we're interested in pursuing, that is at the same elevation, same exact geology as Oyachea, where our guys spent 10 years defining a significant deposit. So there's a lot of reasons why we think we can take all this stuff to the next level.
Excellent. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Again, I encourage everybody to go to palamina.com, go through the corporate presentation, look at some of the pictures. It really is fascinating stuff. Thank you, Andrew.
I appreciate that. Okay, thanks very much, Gerardo.